Six commercial property owners in Watertown are suing the city to try to get a lower property assessment. It would mean paying less in taxes. We learned tonight from 7 News reporter Chad Charette, while that seems like a lot, it's a light load this year.
So this is a drawer in which I keep all the current lawsuits. So these in the front, these are ongoing. These ones in the back, these ones have settled in the last couple of years.
6 businesses along Washington Street, Arsenal Street, and Bradley Street aren't happy with what Watertown says their properties are worth.
Every year since I've been here for 19 years, there have been lawsuits filed.
Community Bank, AmeriQ, McDonald's, North Country Neurology, Stateway Plaza, and the Pepsi Bottling Group all have filed paperwork in state Supreme Court in Jefferson County, wanting lower assessments. McDonald's on Arsenal Street is assessed at $1.6 million right now. It calls that in court documents excessive and overvalued and wants a lower assessment of $1.2 million. Community Bank on Washington Street wants its value lowered from $1.5 million down to $1 million. The city assessor tells us this is a common practice. In fact, this year has fewer lawsuits than usual.
I was a little surprised that after as many years as I've had with so many suits in some years that this kind of rose to people's attention this year.
Provided the cases aren't dismissed, that leaves the city with 2 options: settle or take the businesses to court. It's a process that could take years.
To tell you that we're looking to settle or not looking to settle is, of course, something that we don't want to disclose because there's a certain advantage to us not informing the people that are suing us.
Phelps says there's no court date set yet to resolve these cases. Chad Charette, 7 News.